Hello, hello, friends. Today is Thursday, the 28th of January, and we are going to complete lesson 4 of Module 3, Unit 1. This is research on the Loyalists. We're going to start before we even review our learning targets, and we're going to go back to the Milner and Colonial Voices. And as we read, I want you to think about these questions. What are some examples of fripperies? What does the Milner think of the tax? And how do you know? Is he a patriot? And how do you know? If he isn't a patriot, what might he be? Okay, so let's read the Milner. I sell the latest fripperies in my shop: lace, fans, hats, velvet shoes, a scarlet cloak, silk flowers, fabric, beaded purses, muffs, and mitts. Ladies look to me for fashion in these troubled times. I can make old look new by dyeing silk from pink to red, or freshen last year's gown by rubbing stains with bread. My ladies ask, this season will the petticoat show, the shoe buckles twinkle with gems, or cuffs of lace, a nosegay at the waist, what stylish women in England wear in England or France. And once the patriots come to their senses, my customers will sip tea in fragile cups while they chitter chatter over shapes of skirts. What did you say? Another meeting at Old South about that tiny tax? I say pay it. Count your blessings. I prefer the king to a rabble rousing mob. No meeting for me or any of my kin. We'll be unpacking pretties for the shop. Okay. All right. So now that we've read that, I want to know if you're listening to this lesson because you weren't in class, think about some examples of fripperies. Okay. It said, um, it said on that page, um, let's see. I sell the latest fripperies in my shop: lace, fans, hats, velvet shoes, scarlet cloaks, silk flowers, fabric, beaded purses, muffs, and mitts. All those are things that are fripperies. Ladies look to me for fashion in these troubled times. So we know that there are things that have to do with fashion and things women wear. All right. And then it says, what does the Milner think of the tax? So I'm going to pull it back to this. What does he think of the tax? All right. Well, what did you say? Another meeting at Old South about that tiny tax? I say, pay it. Count your blessings. I prefer the king to a rabble rousing mob. Sounds kind of to me like the Milner doesn't mind the tax. The next question is he a patriot? Well, listen to what it says. And once the patriots come to their senses, my customers will sip tea in fragile cups while they chitter chatter over shapes of skirts. Well, if you're saying somebody's going to come to their senses, you probably don't think that they're thinking straight, or you might not even think very highly of them. So I don't think he's a patriot. Well, if he's not a patriot, what might he be? Well, did you notice the title of the lesson? He might be a loyalist. And I know that because this is the um, it's the group of people that believed that they needed to continue to have the king in England be their ruler and pay the taxes to Great Britain. So that is that. All right, let's keep going. Here are our learning targets for today. I can explain who loyalists were and what they believed, and I can describe the overall structure of the text loyalists. So we can find that out by reading about it, and that's what we're going to do today. If you would please open your module workbooks to page. Sorry, I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. I'm looking in my module workbook just like you are. If you could go to page 12 in your module workbook. Okay, I'm going to read this. I want you to follow along. We're going to determine the gist of each section after we read. I want you to circle any unfamiliar words as I'm reading it, okay? So I'm going to read this first section. The Loyalists were colonists who stayed loyal to Britain and King George III during the American Revolution. They were against American independence. There were about 500,000 Loyalists when the American Revolution started in 1775. That was about 16% of the total population. Loyalists, also known as Tories, lived in all the colonies. They were the strongest in the South, especially Georgia and South Carolina. Many also lived in the mid-Atlantic colonies. New York had at least 3 times as many loyalists as any other country. So, what we're going to do is you are going to, if we're in class, we're going to discuss the um, the gist of that section, and we're going to write it in. If not, I want you to do it independently. And I think that that kind of just explains to us that there were people who were loyal to Great Britain and they were known as loyalists. All right, so who were the loyalists? I'm going to read this next section. Oh, you know what? I can pull this up for you. I'm sorry, I didn't even think of it. There we go. Many important and powerful people were loyalists. Thomas Hutchison was a famous historian and governor of Massachusetts. John Copley of Massachusetts was a famous printer. Peter Harrison of Rhode Island was the greatest architect of all time. Of the time, sorry. Well, some loyalists, like Joseph Galloway of Pennsylvania, did not like Britain's harsh treatment of the colonies, but they remained loyal to Great Britain. They did not want to break away from their country. Even Benjamin Franklin's son, William, was a loyalist. He was the colonial governor of New Jersey. His father urged him to join the Patriot cause, but he refused. The Patriots put William in jail in 1776. He was released in 1778 and went to New York City, which was occupied by British forces. There, he became head of the Board of Associated Loyalists. This board helped direct Loyalist military activities. William Franklin left New York for Britain in 1782 and never returned. Most colonists who worked for Britain as crown officials were loyalists, but loyalists came from other groups as well. Rich people and poor people joined the loyalist ranks. They were bakers and bankers, farmers and sailors. Every religious group had its share of loyalists too. Their ancestries were English, Irish, Welsh, Scottish, German, and Dutch. Some black slaves joined the Loyalist cause. They had been offered freedom by Loyalist leaders, but there were far more American Indians who sided with Britain. Joseph Brant, the leader of the Mohawks, remained loyal to Britain. So did some of the other leaders in the Iroquois Confederacy. Brant was even made a captain in the British Army. In 1777 and 1778, he led Indian forces against American settlements in New York and Pennsylvania. The Patriots fought hard for their cause during the Revolution. The Loyalists did too. Some were spies, some served in the regular British Army, others fought in militias. About 1,900 men fought in more than 40 Loyalist units. The largest of these was Cordlance Skinner's New Jersey Volunteers. So, if you are doing this at home independently, I want you to go through and I want you to write in the gist of each section. Remember, the gist is just a few words about what it is about. So just write it in your module workbook where you have space, okay? Every single paragraph in this section. Tell me what those were. Got it? Okay. After we're done with that, in class, we're going to discuss the meaning of any unfamiliar words. If you're doing this independently, ask your parents what those unfamiliar words mean or look them up. Um, we're actually in class going to do this in breakout rooms, so finding the gist. So you're just going to have to work independently on that. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to use this graphic organizer that you will find in your module workbook on page 14. If you are in Miss John's EL classes, you're actually going to be writing in your module workbook. I'm not sure how Miss O'Brien is going to have you do your EL for her. So just follow her directions. Look on Google Classroom to see what she says. But what we're going to do here is we're all going to use this graphic organizer that you're going to see there. It, again, is attached in your lesson and on page 14. We're going to write on your module workbook, page 14, so we don't lose this. Doesn't get lost in the sauce, right? So we're going to fill this in. Now, source means where'd you get the information from? We're going to get all this information from Loyalists. So write that in, okay? And you can just write it once and draw an arrow. Then you're going to answer this question. Who were the Loyalists and what did they believe? So when you're doing this, I think it would be smart of you. Sorry. I don't have it pulled up. Hang on. Let me pull it up. Let me pull it up. Oh, goodness gracious. Good heavens. Okay. So I'll pull it up on this one. So if you are going to write in this, I think it would be smart for you to write who were the loyalists Okay. What did the Loyalists believe? Okay. And you might even consider doing that twice. So just copy and paste it back there. Okay. And when it says evidence from the text, so you're just kind of going to explain it here. The loyalists were blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to tell me the words exactly from the text. So here's going to be in your own words. And here it's going to be exact words from the story or the text. So if you go back and you open it up and you look at it, you can copy and paste it in there. And remember to copy and paste, you hold down Control, CTRL, and press C for copy, then let up on both. And to paste, you press Control and you hold it down and then you hold down V for a second and then you lift both fingers. So that's copying and pasting. So you're going to fill that chart in. Okay. When you're done with that, come back to the lesson. Okay, next thing you're going to do is you're going to fill in this quick Google form. This Google form is just a couple questions, so you can click it from here. It's also attached to your Google Classroom. I want you to go on and do that. Stay in the meet to do it. Come back. Well, you're not in the meet, sorry, but come back when you're done. And then after that, you're going to take your information from page 14 and you are going to write an informative paragraph to answer that question. Who were the loyalists and what did they believe? You're going to ask me, oh, Miss John, or ask Miss O'Brien, Miss O'Brien, where am I supposed to write it? If I were you, I would write it on the bottom of page 15 because you just answered those questions in a Google form. Okay. And to do this, you need to include these things: a focus statement. So basically, it just restates the question. Tell me what's happening in the war. So tell me, who were they? Okay, who were the two groups of people we've talked about so far? And tell me what each group believed. Give me evidence to support who the loyalists were and what they believed. So that focus statement, the loyalists were blank and they believed blank. So tell me support. And then give me one sentence at least of exact words from the text. Okay. And you're going to write that on page 15 in your module workbook. Okay. Because we're preparing because we have to do this in an assessment in the following days. All right, so once you're done with that, then unpause and come back to the lesson. All right, here's an example of a loyalist paragraph. This is, if yours sounds like this, then you're in good shape. In class, it doesn't have to be exact, but in class, we're going to actually read some of ours out loud. In the American Revolution, some colonists were patriots and some were loyalists, and some didn't have any strong opinions either way. Loyalists were against American independence and did not want to break away from Britain, even though some of them did not like Britain's harsh treatment of the colonies. Loyalists were all kinds of different people. Some were famous, some were rich, some were poor, some were crown officials, and some were from the most patriot families like Benjamin Franklin's son, William. The text, The Loyalist, says his father urged him to join the patriot cause, but he refused. Notice that was in quotation marks, as was Loyalist, because it's the title of a passage. Some black slaves joined the Loyalist cause because they had been offered freedom by Loyalist leaders. A lot of American Indians also joined, including Joseph Brant, the leader of the Mohawks. Both the Loyalists and the Patriots fought hard for their cause during the American Revolution. Lastly, we are going to discuss Revolutionary War Part 2. It is on page 16 of your module workbook. I'm going to pull it up on the screen. Okay, Revolutionary War Part 2. Here we go. War and Independence. The American Revolution is also called the Revolutionary War and the American War of Independence. The first shots of that war were fired on April 19th, 1775. British troops were in Lexington, Massachusetts, searching for hidden arms. That means like weapons, not like actually arms that were hidden. Waiting for the British were 77 Minutemen. They were colonists who were trained to be ready in a minute. No one knows who fired first, but 8 Americans were killed. That same day, British and American soldiers fought again at nearby Concord. And the news spread through the colonies, which prepared for war. But not all colonists were ready for a complete break with Britain. Hundreds of thousands were still loyal to Britain and its king. They opposed independence. They were known as loyalists or Tories. Hundreds of thousands of other colonists were neutral. They were not sure if they wanted a complete break with Britain. The question of independence was finally decided at the Second Continental Congress. That Congress began in Philadelphia on May 1775, the month after the fighting started. At first, the delegates were just as divided as the rest of the colonists. They debated the issue for more than a year. Finally, the delegates adopted the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. It declared that the 13 colonies were free and independent states. The Congress decided to create a Continental Army and it picked George Washington to lead it. In addition, it adopted the Articles of Confederation. This created a confederation or loose union of the 13 states. The Articles also set up a legislature called the Congress of the Confederation. The Congress was the central government of the Confederation. Okay, so thinking about text structure, having talked about that already, I want you to think about the structure of the text. You can also refer in your module workbook to pages 9 and 10. Okay, so we've got description, which tells us a lot of details about something, chronology, which gives us something in year specific or date specific order, comparison, which is examining similarities and differences, cause effect, which tells us the relationship between two events. Because this happened, that happened. And then problem solution. So it gives us the problem and how it was solved, right? So, what do you think the structure of the text Revolutionary War Part 2 was? And here, oh, it didn't let me do it. Good heavens. Here, I'm going to have to do this. Here is your answer. Chronology. If you look, it talks about 1870 or April 19th, 1775, and then it talks about May 1775 and July 4th, 1776. And so all those dates are in a pretty specific order. Okay, so that is your lesson for today. Let's just quick review those learning targets and then we'll be done. I can explain who the Loyalists were and what they believed. I can describe the overall structure of the text Loyalists. And thank you for your participation today, friends. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.